On the morning of April 10, 1912, a luxury liner sailed out of Southampton on its maiden voyage bound for New York. 4 days later, the ship sailed into the history books. The name of the ship, the Titanic. It was Sunday afternoon, April 14th. Captain Smith received a radio message from a ship steaming a few hundred miles ahead of the Titanic. As he crossed the deck, Captain Smith handed the note to Bruce Ismay, managing director of White Star Lines. Ismay barely glanced at the wireless before putting it in his jacket pocket. The message in part read, "Passing icebergs and large quantity of field ice today in latitude 41.51 north, longitude 49.52 west." Company procedure called for such messages to be posted in the officers' chart room. It didn't happen. A critical step in the process was skipped. Before leaving Southampton, the crew expressed concern that there were only enough lifeboats for about half the 2,200 passengers and crew. Assured that the liner met all current safety standards, the crew didn't press the point. But those standards were old, based on the total tonnage of the vessel, not the number of people on board. The process had not been updated. By 9:30 p.m. on April 14th, the ship came within range of Cape Race, Newfoundland, and the radio room was frantic. Hundreds of passengers were sending social messages to relatives and friends in North America. Each had to be hand-keyed in Morse code. Another ice message was received, warning that a large ice field, heavy pack ice, and a great number of large icebergs lay ahead. The radio room was very busy, so once again a critical message was not sent to the bridge. The wireless operators based their decision on what they thought was important. They didn't ask. The ship had just accelerated to 22.5 knots. The White Star Line was pushing to dock in New York half a day early. They wanted to win the Atlantic Blue Ribbon. About 10 o'clock, one of the lookouts in the crow's nest observed, "By the smell of it, there's ice about. As a rule, you can smell ice before you get into it." On this moonless night, the lookout had no binoculars. That piece of required equipment was missing from the crow's nest. Small things, such as missing tools, matter. Less than an hour later, the Titanic struck an iceberg. It was a glancing blow, but the steel plates buckled and sheared their rivets. For about 1/3 of the length of the ship, the hull was split open. It was a mortal wound. After an hour of indecision, the order came: abandon ship. Barely within sight of the Titanic, a freighter had stopped for the night because of the ice. One of the crew, eager to practice his Morse code, turned on the radio. But he couldn't contact anyone because some ship very close was endlessly broadcasting just 3 letters: SOS. The novice radio operator didn't recognize the signal. He knew only the traditional maritime distress code, CQD. That code had recently been changed to SOS. Many radio operators were slow to adopt the new standard, so it wasn't widely recognized. The change in the process hadn't been well communicated to those who needed to know. Just in the past few years, modern metallurgists analyzed an original piece of the Titanic's hull plates. Their finding: the steel was much more brittle than the design specs called for. Among the thousands who worked on the hull, someone must have thought, "This steel doesn't feel right. It's different from what I'm used to." But he didn't ask. The Titanic sank, and 1,571 lives were lost. If just one of those people had questioned the process, would history have been different?